and they want to make sure that everything that's on that tower is supposed to be there, and they're billing for it. And so that's part of what that inspection is all about. And they've got cell climbers that go ahead and do that, 1,500 feet up in the air. So let me, the cameras on the more advanced drones have what's called a gimbal, all right? And the gimbal automatically stabilizes the camera. So I'm going to demonstrate on this gizmo. So what you'll see is this is the gimbal setting, and what it's going to do once this thing does its dance is it stabilizes the camera. So no matter what the craft does, the camera stays stationary. And so my craft could be doing this in the wind, all right? And your picture is going to be rock solid steady. If there isn't moving things, you wouldn't know that you were moving. And that's really amazing technology. But that kind of takes you from hobby to more pro-consumer type stuff. You won't find the gimbal setups until you get to the $1,000 type machines that you're going ahead and buying. What you get from the camera, they use a term called FPV, first person view, is what FPV stands for. Now, that can be either embedded in the controller, so you would see the images right on here, and I can actually plug the batteries in and actually turn it on when it's doing its thing. Or you might have a cell phone or an iPad connected to the controller, so the image is being transmitted from the craft down to this image. So you're basically seeing a first-person view. Now, the regulations say that you must be in visual line of sight. So you can't sit there and fly like this. You have to also be able to see your device. And on complex missions, we run two operators. We have one guy running the camera. We have one guy running the aircraft, right? So on the more advanced stuff, you can run dual operations. So one guy's just, it's a cameraman, right? The camera shifts a whole 360 degrees. It's got, 32 steps of depth. It's just got some crazy cool technology to it that's just wonderful. It creates some great images.
Remember that story we just read about the guy who claimed he signed a listing by delivering the guy, supposedly, it made it on the association website, that he got this big real estate client to, a commercial property to sign up a listing by delivering the contract using a drone.
And he
Not
said,
even possible.
And he said he delivered it 6 miles away.
Yeah.
And he said that he had a waiver and a professional pilot that flew it, right? So I'm expecting to see an Army-like, Predator-like unmanned aircraft that can fly beyond line of sight, because that's 6 miles, okay? You're lucky to get 2 out of this before you lose signal. This is 6. When you go to the video, he's got a Phantom 3, all right? And all you see is the Phantom 3 leave his thing and then land with this guy next to it. Like, there's absolutely no way.
Explain to him the concept of GPS and loss of signal, because I didn't understand that.
Okay, so in the
I thought it flies anywhere.
So in the higher end units, what's really cool and why everybody wants to fly these is because as long as all the technology is working, they are so simple. Once you take them off, if you release all the controls, they stay stationary right there, right now, and don't move within a foot of left to right, okay? And the way it does that is it's got a GPS reference that says, this is my altitude, this is my lat and long, and this is where I'm going to stay. So if I were to go ahead and I demonstrate this in our flight training, I'll put it up like this, and then I'll grab it and start pulling it, and it gets angry. All the motors start going, ring, and when I release it, it goes back to the spot, because it wants to stay right here, okay? Now that's great as long as the GPS stays working. Now because it's a 2.4 cell signal, your regular phone stuff, you know how busy, once that gets crowded, if the unit gets too far away, your battery gets too weak, if there's another GPS signal that's stronger, it basically hijacks that and you can have a GPS runaway. Because now it's not loss of signal, it's just a recapture signal, and it goes off and starts flying away on its own. And you got to flip it to manual mode to go ahead and save that, right? So the GPS signal allows you to go ahead and do that. It also allows for automated flight modes. So since it's controlled by GPS, you can actually pick points on, Google Earth or around a property and say, I want you to go to this point first, this point second, this point third, this point last, and say, go fly the mission. Create a transition point, and it will go ahead and fly that mission right around the house. Hands off. You're not touching it, okay? And that's great as long as you know how to fly it if you've got to bail out of it, right? And so that's what our flight training is kind of all about. It's kind of like saying, hey, I'm a pilot. As long as I get somebody to take off the plane, I can work the autopilot, right? And that would be ridiculous, right? But there's a lot of people that take these things off and do not know how to fly them manually. And ultimately, that's where you'll be when you have to go ahead and bail out of it. That's why we say, we got a drawing for one of these guys at the end of the thing, so you can go start flying one of these.
We've got to do that because we've got 2 minutes left. Did everybody get their business card in the bag?
Let's do it at the end. You want to just wrap up?
Yes, we're going to wrap up, but I noticed a couple people are getting ready to leave.
I have a question. How far can you fly the drone if you stay stationary?
Okay, so the law is line of sight.
Pardon?
The law is line of sight, how far you can see.
Okay.
In terms of the capability of the drones themselves, the higher end ones I could probably get 2 miles out of.
Okay.
I know I can't see 2 miles,
Yeah.
right? So that's the answer to that question, to stay
Okay.
legal.
And if it loses signal, there's drones that will automatically come back?
Yes, so all the pro drones have to have what's called a return to home feature, RTH. Now that only works as long as you're doing your checklist. So if you don't calibrate that so it knows where it is in space, it may go back to the last place you flew. Okay? True. These are common problems, right? Because people don't follow a regimented program. So as long as you calibrate that and it knows where it's at, you can also set the point that it needs to go to before it returns to home. So if you don't set that point high enough, it may hit the building on the way back. All right? So you want to go up, whatever it is, 50 feet, 70 feet, as they begin return to home, and we test it out. So we'll have it fly out there. We'll turn off the transmitter. It should rise to the setting point, and then come back and land probably within 10 feet of where you left. And so that's part of the emergency.
Tell them about the
procedures.
volatility of the batteries.
So these are LiPos batteries, right? This is kind of an average battery. They all have about they're 5,300 milliamps. But you guys don't need to know that.
Right.
They'll run between 15 to 23 minutes. Okay, so it's not a super long time before you got to change them out. But if any of you reads the requirements when you charge, everyone says put these in a fireproof bag when you charge them.
You know,
Okay?
like the phones,
Like
sevens.
the S7s, they're running with too high of a frequency and they're having heat runaways and they're exploding and catching on fire. These will do the same thing. So there are chargers that come with them that you won't have any problems with for the most part, but all of them are kind of a scary thing. They are, you just got to be cautious of where you're charging. You may want to make sure you don't overcharge them, over discharge them. And if you're not going to fly with them for 10 days, you want to go ahead and bring them down to a lower level. They're very expensive. Like for my DJI stuff, they're $150 a piece, right? You better have at least 4 or 5 in your box, right? That'll give you an hour of flight time, hour and a half of flight time. And we fly a bunch, so we're charging while we're flying, so we don't have to have 20 batteries for each craft. And they're only typically good for 300 cycles, so they're a consumable, right? So you got to kind of calculate that into your operations, right?
And so a lot of drones will know battery life, so if it's out and it's running low on battery, it knows?
Yeah, so on the DJI stuff, not only does it know, but you can set limits. So you can go ahead and turn around and say, give me a warning at 50%, execute a return to home at 20%. Depending on the type of missions that you fly and how far out you are to make sure that you, are covered. Yeah, I mean, it may return to home and not make it if you take it to 10% or 5% or really stretch it.
We were out at the quarry a few weeks ago, and a drone just came out of nowhere, and it was kind of hovering over the beach area where we were watching all the wakeboarders kind of do their thing.
Yes.
And what are the penalties? Is that the $27,500 if the person doesn't have the license, or is there a penalty for flying over people because there were no signs? The guy was over by the beach, and he was just kind of.
So they're not supposed to fly over people, and he's not flying as a commercial operator. Probably he's probably flying as a hobbyist,
Recreationally, yeah.
recreationalist. So, he could get a citation for
But
flying
he's
over
right
people.
at Lake in Hills Airport.
It was really close to the airport, yeah, it's right there.
Well, so he should
Three
know,
Oaks.
I mean, so there's all sorts of shoulds, but, I mean, the cops gotta come up.
They did, yeah,
All
they
right,
wanna
good.
chase them out, but.
Right, so I can fly at the airport legally, all right, because I can fly in anything that's Class G airspace without talking to air traffic control, right? I have to give way to unmanned aircraft, right? Now, telling you that, most pilots don't know that,
Hmm.
all right, because it's so new to them as well. So I've been doing presentations at the airport constantly to say, if you see one of these things, you know, if it's behaving erratically and getting in your way, call the cop, but if it's not, it's okay to be there,
Ah, okay.
right? But either one of those, you're not supposed to fly over people.
Yeah, he was over
Right,
people.
so that, because that becomes a liability issue. Any other questions?
Let's wrap up, I'm gonna shut this down now.
Well, thank you very much. We're gonna do the, draw for the life change